Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 19 of Seeking Witchcraft. This is Ashley, and I'm joined by both AuraLea and Sassafras. Say hello.
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 And today we're going to do a special edition after hours episode. So a couple things. One, I realized this is actually episode 20 as I'm recording this. This is technically the 20th episode, but one of them was like a sneak peek. So this is technically the 19th, whatever you want to do. The three of us have been enjoying some wine tonight, and we just wanted to have like an uncensored after hours kind of shooting the shit type episode. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. We have a list of things that we're going to attempt to cover. We'll see how the episode actually goes. Some of the things we're going to try are going to be magical journaling, craft names, the witch's pyramid, beginner purchases at witchy stores, and maybe sigils. We'll see. Also, I know we've been drinking some wine, but we just watched that dumbass TikTok video of the story time with the vet tech. So if you've seen that one of like, we just can't stop laughing about that. It's this TikTok video that's going around on Facebook right now. It's like, story time, I'm a vet tech. And one day this lady brought in her little dog who was covered in bugs. Yeah, so we're kind of just still on a laughing fit after that.
Hot on the heels of the nipples.
The nipple heels.
I promise this is part of the video, so if you're wondering what the hell I am talking about, it's that. But okay, do you guys want to reintroduce yourself for people who might be listening to us for the first time? Who wants to go first?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sassafras.
Hold it.
Okay. I can do that. Hi, I'm Sassafras. I'm a witch. And
You can introduce yourself normally.
what do you mean by normally? What the hell is a normal introduction when I'm a high priest in the Gardnerian tradition. I'm Ashley's high priest here. So I have to be careful what I say at all times. And
Wow.
I mean, what? No. So here is my lovely high priestess. I'll go ahead and hand it over to her now.
Hello. So Ashley has, since the last time I was on here, taught me how to use her phone properly. So hopefully my voice will not be in and out. But I'm AuraLea. I am Ashley's high priestess. I'm not really sure how else to introduce myself.
I know, right?
Yeah, I'm at the point where I'm just like, so I do witchcraft, and then I have a really cool party hat when I need to do high priestess stuff, and then I'm here.
So again, guys, as I mentioned, this is totally like an uncensored after hours type episode where we're going to drink some wine and shoot the shit. And we have some incense burning in the background. AuraLea and Sassafras are talking about the smoke going in their eyes. They're being little bitches right now.
Wow.
I'm totally kidding. But yeah, I mean, we're going to cover some educational witchcraft topics, but we're really just here to have some fun and hang out with you guys. If, you're listening, kind of like hanging out with some friends. So let's see. What should we talk about first? You want to talk about magical journaling?
Sure.
This is AuraLea's topic of interest. So she is all about the magical journaling. So here you go.
So whenever I talk about magical journaling, I talk about it in sort of a metaphorical kind of way where if you are a scientist and you are performing experiments, you want to document everything. You can look back on it and you can see what changed, what questions popped up from what you were doing. So in a witchcraft sense, in a magical sense.
What is magical journaling?
So magical journaling is if you do any kind of spell, or even if you're just doing research on a certain topic, maybe you want to record what things pop out. Say you're doing research on tarot. And you look up a couple of sources, you read a couple of books. It can range from taking notes from said books and logging your questions that come with it, certain epiphanies that may come to you, certain revelations, sort of ahas, as it were. It's also a place where you can document your experiments with things. So going back to the example of researching the tarot, if you have a fresh tarot deck and you've done some homework and you've done some research and you have your journal in front of you and you've thought of things to experiment with your deck and you do your first reading. So you might want to record Okay, so I did my first reading on this day of the week. I personally like recording the moon phase, as over time you will notice certain things about the moon phase, and if you want to go the step further, what zodiac sign the moon phase is in. The time of the day can be very important. Some people are more day people and they're more magically active during the day. Some people are night owls like myself. I literally work a whole ass job around night shift. Whole ass job, 40 hours a week. Yeah, you'll pick up things about yourself that work, but also in this analogy with tarot, you do your first reading and you record the positions, you record the cards that came through. I literally have, I have entries of my tarot readings going back 2 years, and looking back and seeing how I interpreted these readings to how I interpret them now has given me so much insight on how I read and what the tarot means to me. And this can be about anything. If you're researching like the moon phases, if you're researching stones, or if you're researching just the fundamentals and building blocks of spells, when you record and don't allow yourself to be confined by what you think should go into a magical journal and you just write out your thoughts, you will learn a lot about yourself. And I cannot stress enough how important it is, because even tonight, I reference an older journal of mine that I kept from the beginning of my outer court and used it in a conversation that came up with me and Sassafras and Ashley. So, yeah, that's my significance on magical journaling so far.
And one of the really cool things about when you record your thoughts, your experiences over time, this is how you build personal correspondences. Everybody thinks about, like, when a pattern plays out or something like that, they always think, oh, well, what does this stone represent? What does this particular sign represent? How do I interpret this card or that card, for example? When you start to see a pattern in a thing, it will affect how you view that particular event, that particular what have you. Like, if you notice that on Fridays, when you do your thing, whatever it is, on a Friday, if the results seem skewed in a particular direction, you're going to think about Fridays a little differently. You're going to start to digest events on Fridays a little differently. Let's say you start seeing a certain set of numbers everywhere and at all times. All of a sudden,
I looked at you.
They're all looking at me right now.
Yep.
All of a sudden, those numbers, when they play out, it means more than it used to.
I feel personally attacked right now.
It's not an attack. I've been telling you.
I know.
But yeah, so recording it over time is the only way that you're going to be able to notice those patterns, and not just a feeling of nostalgia or a feeling that, oh, I feel like this has happened before. You'll have it documented. You'll know. It won't be you having a feeling, which isn't illegitimate. It's just another layer.
So my last episode talks about having a BOS versus having, a grimoire, for example. And I will say there is definitely a difference. So during my BOS episode, I talk a lot about, like, BOSs are a really good place to log about, like, a spell that you did and, like, how exactly you did the spell, and maybe make some notes on what happened or things you would tweak or things that you can look back to know to tweak. A magical journal, I think, is a different item. It's something that you can write about your experiences during your journey. So, for example, when I started with my outer court, AuraLea asked our group to, hey, start writing about what you did, or, like, after every meeting, write about how your meeting went, what you did, what your thoughts were. And it was very significant. And when I was going through my training, I would go back and read older entries and say, wow, like, I thought about this, or I thought about that, or wow, like, this has evolved in my thought process. So it's really important. It is different from a BOS, but I would ask AuraLea, if somebody is just starting out in their training, or maybe not even their training, let's just say somebody is just starting out in their witchcraft journey, they've maybe read a book or so, they've joined some online groups, they're not in a coven, what would you suggest? Like, when would you suggest that they should start making a journal, or should they make a journal? Like, what should be the first entry? Like, what should that even be about? If you kind of catch what I'm throwing out there.
So if I'm picking up what you're putting down, all right. So I cannot believe I just said that. So I'll use myself as an example, because as you were talking about your BOS episode, I was thinking about, when I was listening to it, I was like, oh my God. So this is just a me thing. I haven't really taken this from anywhere. If someone else uses this same terminology, or maybe you do the same thing but with different names, please hit me up, because holy crap. So I have 3 different things when it comes to my writing. So I have just a 3-ring binder. It's nothing fancy. It's not pretty. I think I tried to be edgy at one point. I put some Theban on the front of it. But that's where, if I'm reading a book and I take notes about what I like in the book, if I'm on a website and I read an article, or I find something that I can print out, information that is not mine, like based on other books or websites, or if I remember back in the day, I used to just read books and just take so many notes about them and put them into this binder. Ultimately, I ended up calling this binder, and roll with me and don't judge me, but I ended up calling this binder my Book of Light. And I'm getting there as to why I call it that. My personal journal, my day-to-day journal that has nothing to do with my magical life, my diary, as it were, of my day-to-day life, or weekly or monthly, because I've gotten pretty bad with writing. But I went to adapt that to being called the Book of Reflection. And then I have a third book, which is a little fancy. It's just a little black book that I bought from our local metaphysical shop way back in the day. It has like Book of Shadows, engraved on it in gold in the front. And as I stated, I call it my Book of Shadows. So why I call these things those names is my Book of Light is information that is shedding light onto a topic. I just printed out how to do a tarot spread. And I have that printed out, and I have it put in the binder so I can reference it when I want to actively engage myself in it. So once I go to actually do that from something in my Book of Light, now that I personally have done it, I then make an entry in my Book of Shadows, kind of chasing that metaphor where I've done the thing. Look, I'm a sucker for metaphors, y'all. And I'm just going to roll with this. If I took something from my Book of Light, I acted on it, my actions casted a shadow. It cast a shadow. And so I record that in my Book of Shadows saying, well, I did this, and this is what happened, and here's the dates, and here's the moon phase, and I'll check on this progress, in a week or so and make a new entry. So that's why I use these names. My personal journal being called the Book of Reflection is just a reflection of my daily life. It's like a mirror, as it were. I'm just recording what happens. So that being said, if that really helped me, because all the pressure wasn't put onto one book. A lot of people have hangups about, oh, well, you got this really pretty book from X website or X witchy store or what have you, and they're so afraid of messing it up. If you have these options available to you, like the 3-ring binder, you can't really mess up a 3-ring binder. I mean, you can, but it's hard to mess up a 3-ring binder. Damn. Yeah. So if that pressure is taken off, where even if you have a Book of Shadows that is nice, you have this kind of workbook to go by and then record your personal stuff into. So a lot of the pressure is taken off by associating different means of information. The first thing I think that I ever put into I did take a section out of my Book of Light. I had tabs for different topics, like, history of witchcraft, elements, herbs, gems, stuff like that. And I remember in the very beginning of it, before I really assigned a name to these books, I had a section called, quote unquote, Shadows, where I was just journaling on, okay, well, here I am today from my Book of Light. I'm going to be recording some stuff about herbs that I found out. And it was just like a log book. And then I transferred it to my Book of Shadows and whatnot. The first thing, I think in your last episode, Ashley, the list of things you could have in a Book of Shadows, if you make a list out of it, you can start making those tabs. And now you know where to stick information that you find.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had a ridiculously gigantic long list. And things like the Wheel of the Year. I even talked about in my last episode, like, you can do an entire section on the Wheel of the Year, or you can make it simple and maybe perhaps just print out a picture of the Wheel of the Year and go from there. Yep. Another thing too, I mean, it's not unheard of to have multiple Book of Shadows or, multiple journals. It's definitely a thing. It's definitely fine. So if you just want to make a very basic BOS or maybe a basic journal and then have another journal where you talk more in depth about what you have, that's an option.
From my own personal experience, I'm a lot less structured, a lot less organized with it, which gives me a little bit of latitude because I'm just not all that worried about particular moments of material. But what I do, so throughout my day, my work day, my days of leisure, I almost always am like jotting down thoughts, ideas, etc. Sometimes I have like a weird moment of poetry or something like that. And so I'll just scribble it down on a little scrap of paper, and then later on I will tape it into, I use little, what are they? They're like 8x6 sketchbooks, which don't have any lines in them. You can put lines in them if you want, but I don't even worry about it. I just write. If it doesn't matter to me if it looks great or not. They're kind of like scribble diaries anyway. But I'll just tape this particular like page of, scrap paper into my little black book. They just toasted something, and I feel like I'm left out. But I'm gonna finish my thought anyway.
Why night?
So
Sorry,
at this point, I'm on like my 7th black book. Like it fills up with information. Now I do try and make sure that like all the information that I put in there, all the stuff that I put in there, has something to do with, with magic, with.
And you're persistent.
Weird and interesting things. Right. I've been keeping this thing up for some time. While you fall off from time to time, I've been trying to have dates in there, if only so that I can keep in mind where I am in the individual set
and
book.
Falling off is definitely a thing. This kind of goes back to something we talked about in one of the earlier or other episodes too, right? Didn't we talk about like waxing and waning with your witchy practice?
Oh, yeah.
So if you can't write in your witchy journal every day, that is fine. I'm here to tell you it is not the end of the world. Believe me, life happens, things happen, and you gotta do what you can. So don't feel stressed if you don't write in your witchy journal every day or every week or every month. Believe me, I have plenty of entries where every single day I was writing something, and then it went to every couple months I was writing something. It's not unheard of. Do you want to finish do you have any...
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Any other closing thoughts, AuraLea?
No, I mean it really just comes down to not being pressured. I mean, write whenever you feel the need to write, but you don't have to do it every day. But the significant things, just jot down.
However, on the other side of the coin, if you haven't done it, then you're not doing it.
Yeah.
So,
Do it.
Even if you're just writing down like the date and don't feel particularly inspired today. Like that's it. That's still an entry, and you still get to look at it later and say, wow, there's something about August which is off for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm shaking my head to that because there's definitely a couple entries that I have in my journal when I was first starting out in the Grove or my training group of, hey, don't really have much to write about today. Here's a couple bullet points about how my day went. And it might be really insignificant shit like I saw a flower today, or like I got a really good deal at lunch today, or like I went to Starbucks. Like it can be just really random things. But the point was to also try to get into the habit of actually writing in my journal, which was very useful. And, going back now, I'm very happy that I had those journal entries because it's kind of like a present from the past to my future or present self to be able to read and see like the state of mind that I was in. Because I will tell you, I'm definitely not in the state of mind that I was in when I first started as an outer court wee little witchling. I've definitely had a, transgressive experience, you can say.
Yeah.
Okay, so shall we move on to the next topic? By the way, for anybody listening to this, this will obviously be posted, but this episode's going to be longer than 30 minutes. It's a special edition. Again, uncensored. We're all having...
Shit with wine.
Exactly. We're all having some wine. We're just kind of shooting the shit, just having...
So Panda made contact with
my cat.
Yes, her cat made contact with my finger as she was talking, so now this officially features her cat.
Panda's a good cat. Okay, guys, what do you want to talk about next? So we have craft names, the Witch's Pyramid, beginner purchases, the Witchy Stores. What do you
Craft
think?
names again.
So let's do craft names. Okay. So craft names. What are craft names and how do you get your craft name? All right, guys. So no shocker here. AuraLea and Sassafras are not my real,
My real name.
not the actual legal names of my HP and HPS. Just as I have talked about in a previous episode, Ashley is my real name, but it's not my craft name, and I'm not going to share my craft name on this podcast for a variety of reasons. Nothing against you guys or anything like that. It's just a name that I like using specifically within a circle context. I don't like saying it outside of circle. So let's back up a little bit here. What is a craft name and how do you find it? Guys, I cannot tell you the amount of posts I have seen on Facebook about people asking, how'd you find your craft name? Like, where'd you get your craft name? Do you need a craft name? Okay. Before I go on my tirade, is there anything you guys want to say first about craft names?
They're not necessary. I mean, they're not necessary, but they can work, and I'll get into why they work. But they're not necessary. Don't feel pressured to get a craft name.
And the original purpose of having a craft name kind of comes from having that is, or rather was, so as things stand now, a person can be a celebrity witch. A person can have that be out. It can be known that you are involved in that sort of thing. And so, as a result of that, nowadays it's not the same stress that it was in, say, the 50s, 60s, 70s.
It doesn't have to be secret.
You don't have to... In those days, if that was the case, you're going to lose something. Like you're going to be living that life full time. Sure, yeah.
So actually, this was in one of Gerald Gardner's books. Sassafras, you might know which one. I want to say it was in Witchcraft Today. AuraLea, you might know too, where people had craft names back in the day. And if it's not in Witchcraft Today, it'd be in the meaning of Witchcraft, but I want to say Witchcraft Today. People had craft names, so, back in the olden days, when people would come knocking, looking for people who are witches to essentially hang them. If people were to accuse somebody of witchcraft, they would only know their witch name. They wouldn't know their actual name. So, for example, say somebody went to a Sabbath, and they went to a celebration and there was a bunch of witches there. But then say one of the witches pissed them off. Like, I don't know, they stole their goat or some shit.
As witches do.
As witches do. They stole their goat. And
For reasons.
For reasons. And they would go to the police or whatever and be like, look, I don't know, Sapphire Moon Shadows stole my goat. Because that's how they knew the person from the Sabbats, and that's how they knew them in the force. They didn't know their actual name. So the police would be like, who the hell is Sapphire Moon Shadow? They'd be like, it's that person over there. They'd be like, well, if you don't even know their real name, how are you going to say they were at a Sabbath? How are you going to say they stole your goat? There would be all these acquisitions, and then they wouldn't have any actual proof because they didn't actually know the person's name, which back in the day was a big thing. So that's one of the ways that craft names became popular. It was to help prevent people from getting accused of witchcraft.
Exactly. So, what goes into a craft name? What makes you feel a particular...
lot of fucking thought.
A particular... I don't know. I didn't really have to do a whole lot of thought for mine.
Well, you were lucky.
I knew what I didn't want, and so that made it a lot easier for me. I knew that I didn't want to choose. A lot of people choose deity names. A lot of people choose various mythological characters. They can choose. I chose a tree. At one point, it was in vogue. And sometimes it is where people will have a tree name, like Willow or something like that. You'll see these names still.
River too, not just the
exactly. Yeah.
Mike's.
Oh well, right. Anyway, my particular sassafras means a lot of things. I know a lot of lore about the plant. It grows all over the place, and it's awesome because you can just pull a tiny little sapling out of the ground and chew on it. And yes, I'm a human, so I'm going to despoil the environment by eating a tree. But yeah. So your craft name, so it's interesting because, as we previously said, the historical thing would be you tell other witches your craft name. You don't tell them that your name is Richard Stevenson and you sell used cars. You don't say that. Instead, you tell people your craft name, and so the other witches only know you by your craft name. And so they only know you by your craft name, and so they can only identify you as, Raven Moon.
Sorry. The cats are fighting and we're all kind of looking in the distance.
Demons.
So I'll tell you guys, for my craft name, I toyed around for a very long time of what it was. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't sure if I was completely fine with my craft name. I didn't know if it was what I wanted to be referred to. I was like, I don't know, it's a kind of a cool name, but do I want to be stuck with this forever, or quote unquote forever, I guess I should say. And I had an experience where somebody referred to me in a witchy setting without my craft name. And in that moment, I was like, how could you not call me my craft name? And it was a very eye-opening experience because I'd been referring to myself as this craft name for a while, but I wasn't really sure how I felt about it, which I think is a common thing when people are choosing a craft name, because sometimes it can feel weird to choose a name that is not your own legal name. But after using my name that I was iffy with for a long period of time and then having somebody refer to me as something different in a witchy setting, I was like, oh no, I really like that name. Don't call me something else. It was a very eye-opening experience because I didn't realize that I became attached to that name, and I did actually have an identity with that name until I was called a different name.
And something in what you said just made me, before you got on saying that, it made me think of, most people have an affectionate term of their full first name, words. And, in certain environments, you have your close friends who know you by a certain nickname. You might have an acquaintance or a coworker that calls you your full name, your full first name, without the affectionate term. And then you have those moments where, and it may not have happened like this for everybody, but for most people, at least most people that I know it did, when your parents, especially as a kid, busted out your full legals, when they called you by your first, middle, and last name, you knew it was serious shit going on. To this day, if someone busts out my entire full name, which thankfully is only done by my one best friend in very rare circumstances, it completely draws my attention on them. And I will stop everything and snap my neck and look over at them like, oh my God, what do you want? And I think that kind of segues into what I'm about to say about craft names, where, and this also kind of boils into craft identity and magical identity and the witchy mindset, which has been talked about on prior episodes. Yeah, she's just in the kitchen just yelling. But yeah, I definitely think that switching from your mundane life and going into your magical self is one of the most powerful tools in your pocket when it comes to all of this. It is absolutely necessary. And if you can do this without the need to have a different attire or lack of attire or a name or an environment, then more power to you, because that's more than I can do. But I will say that it's a very powerful tool to possess, to have those triggers. Like, for instance, this is not the only reason why magical / ritual / etc. robes are used, but why robes are used, why names are used, why
would you use a robe?
Yeah, so it's yeah, and switching from, when I go to work and I have my coworkers and my customers call me by one name, I need to disconnect from that when I step into the circle, in this liminal space between the worlds and of this divine environment, I need a different identity because it calls upon that aspect. And I'm not saying that you need a craft name to experience that. If you can get something else to trigger that response in yourself, again, like a certain incense, or maybe you have certain music that gets you in that mood, whatever helps you transcend and become something other than your day-to-day person that is in connection with the gods, or if you don't, worship the gods or have a relationship with the gods, something that gets you into that working mode of being a witch or a magical practitioner or what have you, that's still very important to have. And that's where the craft names, it's one of the easiest and most accessible tools to have for this transition.
Another aspect of that, or rather another aspect of these names, is names are powerful. Names possess power. Imagine if you were to do let's say that you have an acquaintance or a close friend or a coworker or what have you, someone who needs some bit of work done for them. Well, the whole time you're doing that work, you're going to be focusing and thinking of their name. You're going to be using their name in a sympathetic, magical context where, let's say you have you could write down their name and then do something involving that. The power of names is inherent in that, and we see it all play out in all kinds of ways. So in a few ways, having a craft name actually shields you from that a little bit, because while your craft name was something that you chose and it's affiliated with you and it's known, the gods know you by that name, what have you, it is...
What if you don't believe in the gods, if you're not Wiccan?
Well, I would say more than Wiccans believe in the gods, but if you are... I don't know. It gets a little tricky. If you are an agnostic witch, if you do magic at all, you are acknowledging that there are powers beyond yourself, beyond humankind. There are spirits. There are all kinds of entities. I don't know. I would say that if you're invoking powers, then we're not necessarily talking about intelligent forces. Anyway, I'm getting completely sidetracked by this. But spirits have names. And knowing the names of spirits is significant.
See, this is interesting.
Mike.
This is interesting because you and I have talked about a lot. I don't think we've talked about this. I definitely think that you can perform magic and not believe in divinity. I think you can absolutely rely on personal power.
Not necessarily saying divinity. Let's say that you have access to some of the mechanics of reality.
What does that mean? Yeah.
Well... Frankly, if you're going to be doing magic, that's what we're talking about. You have a key you have the ability to perhaps influence events in a manner which is not linear to your direct action. You can take an action which causes a change, and...
Only if you catch these magic hands.
Girl. Look, it's wine night. We can't be 100% serious.
I'm just trying to cover my bases here. Anyway, right. So, if you are someone who doesn't necessarily... everyone, in order to do this thing, you have to have a theory of magic. You have to have a theory of reality. And you're going to run on your theory. If my theory involves elements that aren't in your theory, that doesn't invalidate you and it doesn't invalidate me. You do your thing. You get things how you get them. It's very possible that you and I believe in the same things but call them different words.
Yep.
It's
Christianity.
Big one.
Christianity, big one.
Here. That leads me into another topic that I actually didn't have planned for this episode, but a topic I did plan to talk about. What's the difference between us versus them in the course of Christianity, for example, versus witchcraft or Wicca? This is a heavy ass topic. Ooh, this is a hell of a topic to do for a uncensored special edition.
Need some more wine.
I had said that there has been too much wine involved to go into that, and now that you have planted the seed, now the high priest is looking for more wine. What have you done?
Listen, I'm just continuing the conversation that we have organically started.
Actually, I have a story about that. So, Well, no, if we're talking about, a rose by any other name, and some pagans may see this, if you're a pagan out here listening to this, and your first thoughts go to soft polytheism, bookmark that. Anyway, but I was raised Episcopalian, right? Until I was 11. And I have a story about this because I had already been practicing witchcraft. God, how old was I for this? I was, 16, 17. Long story short, I had gone to a lockdown. I don't know. My friend went to her a lock-in. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I went to a lock-in with a friend. It's not a church that I went to, but my friend wanted someone to accompany her. Anyway, so I joined her for this, and I remember, I'll never forget, I was standing in one of the rec rooms, and there was a video on about some Christian thing. And I can't remember the context, unfortunately, but I remember standing there and watching it and thinking to myself, I'm like, what I believe in, Christ. I feel like by saying this, a lot of oh, no pun intended, son of a bitch. It's gonna be I've got to choose my words very carefully because I feel like a lot of people in this moment are like, hold on, what? But I've had several experiences with Christians where Christians who the Christianity based on love. Okay, that is true Christianity as I see it. It's based on love. And I remember I was in this environment, and I was watching this thing, and I was having these thoughts about how it all comes back to love. And this woman, one of the I don't fucking know, one of the caretakers, one of those chaperones or whatever, came up to me, and here I am in my phase, and I had this like long trench coat on, I had this pentacle, and I was in my phase, right?
Trench coat?
I had a long trip trench coat. Yeah, girl, I didn't play.
We can no longer be friends.
I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry. But she comes up to me and she said something. She saw how invested I was in this video, and she made some comments about God. And I wasn't about to... I wasn't about to lay on my shit like, oh, well, you can't talk to me about that because I'm not in the same religion. Even then, I'm like, look, I think that people who are true in faith and true in a religion or a spirituality based on love can at the very least, find common ground. So I tested this theory, and I explained to her what I found in my practice and the beautiful things that I found in my beliefs and my spirituality. And I didn't use any specific words. I didn't use any specific wording. And I laid this on her, and she agreed. She's like, yeah, no, absolutely. That's the same thing that I find. And she's, assuming that I'm coming from a Christian standpoint. So it was very interesting to describe an experience that to her was purely Christian. And to me, it was purely spiritual / whatever the hell I found myself in that point in my life. So I think people can find some common ground and get incredibly lost behind trying to give it a term.
Hey guys, so as you know, I was raised very Catholic. I don't know if it's because I was younger when I was essentially forced to go to church, or maybe I just blocked it out of my memory, or like what it was. But I don't remember a ton of what we talked about during church. I remember the logistics of everything. But I will say, in Wicca and witchcraft, there's a lot of central elements that come to play. There's an altar, there's consecrated water, there's incense, there's wine, there's some sort of blessed food, there is a prayer to the gods. So I'm just going to talk about Wicca right now. If you want to just think about witchcraft, we could take out the aspect to the gods. But I don't necessarily see a difference between the holy water when you walk into a church versus the water that we consecrate on the altar, or the altar that we have in a Wiccan or witchcraft circle versus the altar that's at a Catholic church, or the cake that we bless during circle versus the Eucharist or the body of Christ that's drank. I see a lot of similarities between the two. And I think about this actually quite often, to be honest with you, because my family is very, very Catholic. And there's times where I will do some witchcraft about something happening and say it comes true. And I will talk to my mom because maybe she knows like I want X, Y, and Z to happen. And she'll say, oh, I was praying to Jesus for you, or like I was praying to God for you. And I'll be like, okay, thanks, Mom, thanks. But like, meanwhile, I did a spell about it, or I did something to try to influence the universe to be in my favor, which is essentially a spell. And it kind of comes down to, well, what's the difference between the two of these things? What's the difference between my mom praying to Jesus or me doing a physical action to try to send my energy out into the universe to tip the scales in my favor, as you will, which is what a spell is. I personally don't see a huge difference between the two. And everybody's going to have differing opinions on this. There's no right or wrong answer because we're not going to know the answer in this life, as it will. But I don't see a difference between the incense they burn in between the pews, the incense I burn on my candle, or the consecrated water that I have on my altar, or the holy water they have when you walk into the church, or the intense praying. I mean, if you get a group of people together to do a prayer circle and they are intensely praying versus like a spell that I am doing, or maybe like I'm doing with my coven, the energy that is felt is very, very, very similar to me. And who's to say that it's different? And this is a very long thing that goes back to something that I wrote when I was in my outer court of ultimately what's the difference of the energy that we're working with. That's a whole nother topic for another time because this is already, I can tell, going to be.
Energy work is its own thing. Energy work is its own thing.
Exactly. That's a whole nother topic for another time. Maybe not today because this is already going to be a long episode. But I don't necessarily see a difference. I think we all have different ways to explain divinity, and we all have different ways to explain the energy that we work with. And I think that we view the energy differently. So I think those that are Catholics, for example, and I'm just going to use that because that's my experience, see energy through Jesus and see praying as their way, praying to God as their way to make energy happen. But witches use that energy and send it towards the universe, or maybe send it towards the gods that they focus on if they're Wiccan. And, it comes back to what you personally believe.
Right. No, dramatic pause.
Dramatic pause.
Not exactly. I think one difference that you can point out in a variety of different ways, and this applies to witchcraft, writ large as well, is often you have someone who acts as an intercessor between the person with the desire and the forces of the cosmos. So, for example, you are directed in your worship by a priest. Or you are, actually, in its own way, you could probably say that the use of a patron saint, the Virgin Mary, what have you, could also seem to serve as like an intercessor in between there if your beliefs go in that direction. Or if you go to someone who is very knowledgeable about, say, witchcraft, and you believe in it yourself, and you really want a spell to go well, and you ask them to do a spell on your behalf. It's one of those things.
Do you believe your priests, or do you believe your local witches?
Well, it isn't. I would say that people who use intercessors and intermediates, if they believe that someone else is more plugged in than they are, and they go through that route, that's a little different than if you decide to wipe the Cheetos dust off of your hands and interact with all of these things yourself. And so perhaps that's a little bit of a difference, but a person could perhaps have the perspective that private prayer at home is really not a whole lot different. But I don't know. I don't think spells are prayers.
Yeah?
I think that prayers can be a part of what you do, absolutely. And then you start to think about it gets into other elements. If you are a witch, if you're not a Wiccan and worship isn't a part of it, do you have an altar? Are you using an altar? Where does that go? Does that lead you in a direction? It may not have a conclusion, or your understanding of an altar may be fundamentally different. I'm not trying to call anybody out on this. But, all right, hold on.
Just a quick comment. That goes into another layer. This is witchcraft and Wicca especially they can be very deep layers.
Oh, of course.
So can you tell me what, in your view, is the difference between a prayer and a spell?
I would say that in a lot of cases, a prayer it possesses an element of something that goes into a spell, but a spell goes a little further in a particular direction. So, for example, when you have a prayer, you have an intense desire, you have a manifestation of your will. You desire a particular thing or you desire a particular outcome. You want grandma to beat cancer. You want your car to last another year. You want a variety of things. Yeah, you want you want another puppy for Christmas. Well, it's one thing to kind of wish. You can wish in one hand. No, I'm not going to say that. In any case, no, you can wish in one hand, you can shit in the other, and see which one gets filled first.
Wow. Oh my God.
So if you have an intense desire like that, witchcraft goes a little further, and it pulls in a particular direction. You are going to now do a somatic action, which is focused utterly on your will and your desire, but you're also utilizing a number of elements in the expression of that. All the various things on the altar, for example, come into use. All the various elements go together because you're trying to, and you have to alter your mindset to make it work. You can't just, go do it and throw it, 3 sheets to the wind. No, you kind of have to be focused on it, or at least trying to do that.
And I think that's something that actually throws a lot of beginners off, which of course is the audience of this, which is, how do you know exactly what to do for your spell work? How do you know, for example, having this essential oil or this rose quartz or performing an X, Y, and Z is going to perform your outcome versus, hey, let me pray to Jesus? How do you know?
So a couple things. Circling back. Going back to the
Deasil, we return to.
Wow.
Okay, so side note, really quick. Still relevant. What's really interesting is my mom claims that she prays for me all the time, and every now and then, it is completely unprovoked. She wears a completely different scent than what I like. And every now and then, I don't see her too often, so it's not like her perfume is on my stuff. But every now and then, I will smell her. And it got to a point where it was so often, and I'm like, girl, what's up with this? I was just like, Mom, what's going on? And she's like, oh, I don't know, maybe you smell me praying. It sounds really weird to say, but it's like, maybe you smell me praying about you. And I'm like, oh shit. So that leads into, other stuff. So going back to spell work versus prayer. So I've thought about this a lot because you have a lot of people coming to you, and you have a lot of these edgelord folk saying, well, okay, Christian, so what's the difference between a spell and a prayer? Well, your immediate response would like to say that there is no difference. But for those who are paying attention, that's not enough for you. So a prayer is literally giving up your will. It is surrendering your will to a higher power and expecting them to deliver based on the faith that you pay them in. So your faith is a payment in them fulfilling your prayers. Damn. It's not a bad thing, but it's again, I was once Christian, and I did pray as a kid. I have a whole ass story about the strongest time I ever prayed, and my shit came true. Anyway, so spell work, however, I can say, and this is not, it might be biased because I don't know if you all have noticed, but I'm kind of a witch. So I'm not biased in a sense where I think mine is better, but in my opinion, spell work is more, you do the work yourself. You retain that personal responsibility because you are going out of your way to do your homework and to do all the things that need to be done to understand what makes a spell successful, and you're going out of your way to do it. And this actually leads into another topic we have on the list for the Witch's Pyramid, which we'll get to. But my personal difference between a prayer and spell work is the spell work is you are assuming most, if not all, depending on your religious beliefs, all responsibility of the outcome. It is purely based on the work that you put into it. If you are like us, if you're a Wiccan and you do have a religion because gods are involved and there is worship on these deities, yeah, they definitely play a part. But you also are doing the work to make sure that your gods are present. There are certain things that we do in ritual that calls on them. We go out of our way and we do the work. And that, kind of goes side by side by why certain times you say a spell is a working or magic is a working. You're doing fucking work for it. Like, you're not just sitting there and giving it up and expecting something. Yeah.
AuraLea is making a very good point. I actually said something to her and Sassafras.
Yeah.
Oh
shit, yeah. Oh shit. Oh my god, it just came full circle. Sorry, I'm excited. Sorry.
Full circle, you say.
Fuck.
Yeah, so actually, gosh, what was it, about a week or two ago? Not even 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was telling them that I had this spell in mind that I wanted to do. And when I planned out this spell, I thought to myself, oh man, it's going to take a lot of energy. That's going to take a lot of stamina. It's going to be a whole ass thing. And then I just, I'm in the middle of thinking in my mind of this is going to be so much, blah, 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 being emo and I don't feel like doing it. I have this voice come out of goddamn nowhere, just fucking, destroy me and just be like, that's why it's called a working. And I was like, oh, I was just like, oh, shit. Okay. You're right, fam. But yes, that's why it's called a working, because it takes time. It takes energy. It takes stamina. It's not a quick thing. It's a thing that you have to put your energy into it. And sometimes you don't want to do it.
And I'm not saying because I've put a lot of emphasis, because I'm a witch. I mean, obviously this is a Witchcraft podcast, so we're going to put focus on that. Right. That's not me saying that prayer doesn't work. That's not me saying that there are people, there are definitely people who may pray before an idol. They might pray before a candle, or they might pray with a rosary. They might bring in other elements into their prayer, which is very similar to spell work. We bring in elements like
7-day candle.
Yeah, a 7-day candle. We cast a whole ass circle, or very simply, we have our altars and we might go to it and say, hey, yo, God and goddess, what up? So here's my thing, blah. I'm not saying that people who pray are doing light work stuff. I definitely think people who pray are doing work.
And that's not to say that there has been times I've gone to my own personal altar in the subject of a spell. I've just prayed to the gods of hey, can you help me out, fam?
Absolutely the same. On my personal altar right now, I have a candle that my friend gave me. If you listen to this, you know who you are, because I was supposed to light it for 7 days and I went on vacation and I couldn't. But anyway, I've been trying to, at least light that candle every day for an hour to continue on. He did it working for me, and I don't know what it is. He wouldn't tell me, because I respect that, which goes also into the Witch's Pyramid, which we'll get into. But yeah, no, I've definitely just gone to my altar and just lit one of the candles. I'm like, you know what? I got nothing for what I'm going to do for spell work, but I just need to talk to y'all. Or I need to just kind of, check in with my higher self, or maybe I just need to meditate. It's the same thing, but in different varieties and different levels and different severities. And I'm not saying that those who pray are doing anything less than what we're doing. We're just more animated about it.
Also, not to say, okay, so prayer often has a focus. Sometimes that focus is entirely devotional. I think it's always unfortunate, regardless of whether it's witchcraft or if it's anything, any religion that involves prayer, anything that involves a level of devotion like this. I often think it is a shame that sometimes you see folks using the gods as if they were a genie in a bottle, and saying,
yes,
bring me, bring me wealth, bring me love, bring me luck.
Gimme.
Right. I think in witchcraft, there's a little bit of an equivalent exchange principle in effect. What is the value of a human soul? No. And so there is a bit. And, the idea that you are giving of your devotion to the gods in return for, oh no, absolutely. A person, at least I myself, have been like, look, sometimes something good happens and it feels like I need to balance the scales by doing something for the gods. Sometimes it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like I need to do something for the gods to make things better in the future in a way that I won't anticipate. Not necessarily like in a direct action, but yeah, it's complicated, it's tricky, and there isn't always going to be an easy metaphysical answer for this. A lot of this is you got to feel it out. You got to see how it resonates and feels to you. A lot of people have a very, very devoted, I mean, they're all about devotion. They do things for the gods. That's their relationship with witchcraft, with this sort of thing. And it's kind of tricky because where is the line crossed between prayer and magic? I do think that there are some significant differences. I think it's a little hard to elucidate in a straightforward or quick fashion. So that's the world, I suppose.
Okay, cool. So we're going to talk about the witch's pyramid momentarily, but I kind of want to jump topics real quick and talk about just some more beginner things, because we've been kind of going deep in the layer of Wicca and witchcraft, as you will. Yeah, it gets pretty deep, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, the more that you learn, the more you realize there's a lot more to consider. So let's talk about something a little bit more basic, as you will. Let's jump to the topic of, if you are a brand new beginner and let's say you're going to a witchy store or buying something online or visiting your first ever witch shop ever.
Spelled with an extra P and an E. Shoppy.
Oh my God, witch shoppy. Wow. Yes. What are some things that you should consider buying when you're at this witch shop? Well, first off, obviously that's going to depend on what the store actually sells. But let's just start with some things that we think are essential to a beginner. So for myself, I think a lot of things with witchcraft you can possibly find in your own kitchen cabinet. You can find spices, you can find salt, you can get water out of your sink. And when it comes down to it, you don't necessarily need tools. They're not an absolute requirement, but it helps. It's not a bad thing to have. Just like if you were to cast a circle, it's not a bad thing to have a glass of wine here. It's not a bad thing to have some incense burning. They're supplementary to what you're doing. So if you are going to a witchy shop, if your witchy shop happens to offer this, I would absolutely recommend buying an athame. And as I mentioned during my Tools and Terms episode, an athame, which is pronounced many different ways. You could say athame, athame, however the hell you want to say it. I say athame because that's how it was taught to me. Sassafras says it a different way sometimes. He is not the one who told me how to say that, for the record.
Although I do encourage her not to pronounce it how I do. I watched a particular it's a British documentary that I watched, and the way in which they pronounce it was athame. Ugh. And so it's been stuck. I can't lose it. It's funny, when I talk about it from the context of someone other than me, I'll often say it an athame. I'll say it in a different way. What's wrong with athame? What's wrong with that?
I just cringe.
All right, you say yours.
Athame.
Okay, I see. I get it.
I have had other witches, though, ask me, or say to me, oh, why do you say it so weird? And I'm just like, how the hell do you say it then? And we've sent, messages back and forth of how we say athame or athame or...
It's fun. I mean, let's admit it. There's a little bit of, enjoyment to be found in all of the nitpicking, all of these little tiny details that kind of go into it. I think it's fun that I'm kind of stuck in this pronunciation and I can't quite lose it, but I'll try and say it to other people in the fashion that they speak. But to get back to the point of why you would buy a athame, go right ahead.
I was just going to add one more thing. I've actually had another witch make fun of me and tell me that I sound bougie by saying athame. He was like, why do you say athame? It's athame. And I was like, no, it's pronounced athame. Like, don't say it like that. So as Sassafras was saying, it is kind of fun. It is kind of a joke and interesting to see how people pronounce the word. If you're wondering what the hell we are talking about a double-edged dagger. Yes, it is pretty much a knife, and it's used for ritual. It's not used to cut things. It's not used to stab things. It's not used to kill things. Not used for bloodletting. Nothing like that. It's used to direct energy. I think it's a very important tool to have in witchcraft, and I will be the first person to tell you that, listen, guys, I watched that MTV True Life, I'm a fucking vampire, whatever episode, and like the girl in that episode, like the beginning of the True Life episode, she had an athame. She was doing a photo shoot with it. I wasn't super into witchcraft like that. And I saw her with this athame and I was like, that's really lame. Like, this girl's just posing with a knife and blah, blah, blah. Like, what's the point of that? And then during my outer court in the very beginning, they were like, hey guys, you gotta get an athame. And I was like, why do I have to get a knife? But okay, I'm not gonna question what they're having us do because, you know, I'm learning and I'm in this training grove, whatever. So I went out and I bought an athame and we used it for a little bit of time. I remember, I think I even actually wrote in my journal about this of like, I don't know, I'm waving this knife in the air. I don't really get like why I'm doing this, blah, blah, blah. And then one day I thought I lost my athame. And I remember thinking to myself like, oh no, I really like that little dude. Like, and, you know, in my mind, I called him a little dude. And I was like, where did he go? And that was kind of when I realized like, oh, no. I like practicing with my athame. I like using my athame to, you know, divert energy into certain ways. And it kind of goes back to the whole thing with the names of, I was in a witchcraft setting where I thought that, or my actual name, Ashley, was said instead of my craft name. And it was in that moment that I was like, oh, I really like my craft name. I don't really like when people say my actual name in witchcraft. So yeah, it kind of went back to that with the athame story. So yeah. So I think if you can get an athame at a witchcraft store, for example, as a new tool to get, I think it's a useful one to have. Sassafras, I don't know if you have any differing opinions on things beginners should get from stores or anything. What are you thinking about this whole topic?
Purchasing, I mean, witchy stores are really interesting and neat places. They have a variety of things that are available, and it's going to vary based on different stores. The closest one at least for the closest witchy shop for us, at least for me, where I live, closest to where I live, has a very wide variety of herbs, which is wonderful because that's an interest of mine. I make tinctures. I do all kinds of things with it. It's teas, all sorts of things. I also use them, with a medical purpose, things that help with clear up congestion, or things that will help deal with a sore throat or a cough, or various things to take when you have a fever or something like that. You get all kinds of wonderful things with herbs, but that was an interest that I developed. It takes time. If I would start off with herbs, if I would start off with various crystals as a place to start, I don't think I would. I would instead chase down those interests and develop them, and then once they had been developed, I would go with that. But, for me, the most important thing to do is to just get, without jumping off into a whole other topic, I think about the most basic, most simple things that you want to use. If you are really thinking and saying to yourself, I need a wand. I'm going to need a wand. I should probably buy a wand. If you are thinking to yourself, I absolutely must have a good brazier. I need something I can burn my incense in. I need good incense. Sure, if you have a need or a desire, something that you think you require to get started, go ahead and get that. Feel it out. See where it leads you. Maybe you don't like this particular incense or that particular incense. You will eventually find your way. And that your intuition, if there's if there's anywhere where intuition matters, it's witchcraft. Like, if there's going to be somewhere that it matters in this world, witchcraft is home. That's your insight, your intuition is vital. It's important. So I would say trust that. You don't need to buy the biggest statue of,
Baphomet.
you do need to buy the biggest statue of Baphomet, but you don't.
Daddy!
You don't need to buy a titanic
All right,
statue
Sabrina.
of a god. You don't need to do any of that necessarily. But on the other hand, it is good and important to support these little businesses if you want them to be around. They do ultimately need to, pay the power bill. But anyway, trust your intuition. Buy what calls to you so that you can get started. If you're getting started, then get what you need to get started.
I'll say too, my athame, when I bought it, I actually didn't get it from a standard witchy shop. I got it from a shop that was selling like armor and shit. And the really funny thing about this place that I got it from is I went one time with my Grove sister to this shop, and every single time to this day, I try to go back to the shop, it's closed every time. So it was kind of like it was meant to be when I got my athame. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to go to a witchy shop. I would also recommend checking out antique shops. So one thing that we talk about, or that I talked about in my tools and terms episode, is consecrations. So I think AuraLea's haunted by this topic right now, just to let you guys know, because I am very transparent in this episode. If this episode had a weird moment in it, it's because AuraLea, Sassafras, and I talked for about 2.5 hours. And like the last hour and a half just did not record. And we were just talking and talking and talking and did not realize that it stopped recording. So I'm kind of picking up where we left off. We're all a little tired and we're all just kind of like, oh my gosh, we talked for so long. So consecrations was the thing that AuraLea talked about for a long time before my podcast was like, no, you're done recording. So she might just want to give a Cliff Notes version. So if you're buying an athame, for example, let's say you go to a witchy shop, doesn't have to be an athame, it could be a bundle of sage, let's say, or it can be some incense, or it can be a new wand, exactly, or whatever the hell somebody else might have on an altar. As a beginner, I get a lot of questions of, okay, I understand consecration. I understand, you got to cleanse something and make it new. But I get a lot of people asking me, what exactly do you do? I mean, do you just stand, let's say, with an athame or a bundle of sage? Like, do you just stand with it in your hand and be like, I cleanse this by the power of Jesus? like how exactly do you cleanse this? Or
Bring it up at all kinds of places.
I think a lot of people kind of want like a step-by-step, oh my God, Jesus, a step-by-step instruction of like what they should be thinking or what they should be feeling, or it's complicated, especially when you're a beginner. So AuraLea, could you shine some light onto some beginners of what they could be doing or thinking when they're getting this new witchcraft tool per se, and they want to consecrate it?
Let's do this again. All right, so
Well, again for us.
yeah,
Not again for the pod.
yeah. I mean, well, hey, everything happens for a reason. I'm a firm believer in that because I'm new age as fuck. But
Y'all don't understand. We talked for a long time before realizing the podcast stopped recording us.
y'all have no idea. Anyway, but that's okay. I mean, maybe there's a reason why it happened, and made me refine my definitions of such. So here we go. So going to explain what consecration is and how to consecrate something. So I will reference there's a really good pagan author, a really good Wiccan author. Her name is Deborah Lipp. I saw her present this definition of consecrations in an incredibly well-spoken way that resonated with me because I'm very metaphorical. I love talking in analogies. I love relating to reality in that way. So, skipping minor details for the sake of time, she described consecration as having whatever item that you're consecrating is a stem cell. It has zero identity, but it has all the potential to do whatever you assign to it. Consecration is injecting the stem cell with a purpose and with a cause and with a task. So I will say, and I didn't mention this before, as you guys wouldn't know, but I do definitely think there is a slight difference between charging, consecrating, and blessing something. Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I struggled with these three definitions for a long time. So sticking to consecration is taking something that is going to serve you and assigning it that identity to have that capability to serve you. So if you have something let's say that you are an absolute beginner and you have just come into this, and perhaps maybe this is the first episode you've ever heard on Witchcraft ever.
Thanks for listening.
Hey. So let's say that you really want to cleanse your home, and you know, because it's literally everywhere, that sage is really good for doing that. All right. My reservations aside from whether or not you have the cleanse sage, is it would definitely help if you consecrate the sage. And what that means is you would go to your witchy shop, or maybe it's not a witchy shop. You somehow acquire your sage. You go home. Okay, you are an absolute beginner. You don't have an altar set up. You don't have tools. All you have is yourself and this bundle of sage. And fire.
Salt and water.
And perhaps some salt and water. Yeah. Maybe some incense, hey. But let's say you have none of this. Let's just say it's you and the sage. Let's go incredibly bare bones as possible. So you went out, and again, this kind of plays into one of the topics that we mentioned we may talk about, and I hope that we get to it, the witch's pyramid.
Get to it.
Yes, we are.
We have to.
So this plays into that. You went out with the intention of purchasing this, of acquiring this sage for a very specific purpose. So you have the sage, you get home, you want to consecrate it. What's that mean? So the best way I could describe consecration with no tools is you would like to take your projective hand, which is the hand that you write with. You want to hold the sage. And there's potentially optimally 3 steps. You want to remove it of any prior negative aspects.
Yeet.
You want to yeet it of any prior negative aspects. Because all natural things, all elements have both good and bad, quote unquote, elements to them. All elements are themselves. They don't know what makes it good. They don't know what makes it bad. You want to make sure that if something is of an element, i.e. sage, sage is primarily an earth element, but the way that it is used in this context is both earth and air, and also fire. So you want to make sure that these elemental aspects have all things that do not serve you removed from them. So the first thing that you would do is you would remove that. And you can use any words that you would like. You can say something along the lines of, I banish all aspects of this item that do not serve me. The next thing that you would like to do is you want to assign it a role. You want to say, I assign this sage, I consecrate this sage, I empower this sage with the authority to cleanse all negativity from my home. Or
Power of Christ compels you.
Christ. Something, it does not have to be specific. And I think beginners really need to remember that. The wording, words can be powerful, but if the intention is the most powerful part. So after you've done this with the sage, and you've given it a role, you want to enact it immediately. You want to go ahead and use the sage in your home. Feathers are nice. There's an elemental aspect that plays into using feathers to disperse the smoke, as it were, which, trying to keep it to beginners, you don't need to. So you have this consecrated sage. This sage now knows that its sole purpose is to cleanse your home, because that is the role that you gave it. As long as your intentions are sincere, and as long as your intentions are very clear and concise, things are going to listen to you. Energy knows energy. Energy will always play with other energies, and you have got to know how to sail these energies and maneuver these energies, and if you can do that, it's fine. I'm sure the last thing that I said before we completely tanked the last hour and a half was more eloquent, but that's my second go around, and I'm hoping I did it fairly well.
You want to transition to the witches here then?
Yeah, so as Ashley had said,
Wait, can I ask you a fun off-topic question?
Yeah.
So you and Sassafras are going by AuraLea and Sassafras. Is it odd to be like, so Ashley and AuraLea and Sassafras are just, yeeting themselves in this conversation?
so that kind of goes into the topic of how names are used and why. I know that in this podcast, Ashley is your name. I don't care if your name was Bob.
Wow.
Like-
That was my fucking example.
Yeah. So, but I know that identifying through this podcast, you're Ashley, I hone in on that, knowing how powerful names can be, and absolutely respect and honor that. So in this moment, as we're recording a podcast, you're nothing but Ashley. You know what I mean? So
you're saying they haven't even seen me at my full witch potential. Dun, dun, dun.
dun dun dun.
This isn't even my final form.
This isn't even my final form.
No.
But that's the interesting thing about witchcraft and having a witch name is it is an identity. And as Ashley, I'm, I don't know, a 20-something-year-old millennial with a podcast, working as a researcher. I have 2 cats and I have a master's degree. But as my insert witch name here, I'm probably very different in circle. I don't present as the same person. And I actually talked a little bit about this, how it's almost like a persona or a different personality where I'm not the same person in circle as I am as Ashley. And I think that's a common thing for people when they're in circle.
And that's intentional. I'm not saying that. So I wanted to say that it is intentional that you are a different person in circle. And that's not taking away from any good thing that you are as a person outside of circle. It just means that sometimes these worlds don't mesh,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yes.
Again, it's not favoring one or the other. You can't. How can you be a successful witch if your mundane life is crashing to shit?
When you're in a circle, you're between the worlds, as one may say.
Yep.
And your alternative self may not be the same person that you are just on a normal mundane level, which is another reason why names may have power.
Yeah, and
It's a whole ass topic.
it's a whole ass topic. And aside from the fact that the old archaic fucking magical systems talk about people and anything that exists in this reality having a true name, not even going to get into that. But one of the things that I'll really quick. So in another forum on Facebook that I manage, I actually just posted a thread very recently about craft names. And people have very differing opinions. I had one person come in, and I'm not gonna say they were hostile, but there was a tone. And they were like, "Well, I don't really see a need for it. I don't think that adds to your magic. It's like how putting on a black pointy hat and a cloak doesn't give you more power and doesn't make you more of a witch." And I'm like, that's not what I'm asking. Anyway, I'm being petty. But
there's a whole lot I can say about that. Actually, yeah, there's a whole lot that I can say about that because this goes back to my athame story. At first, when I had the athame, I didn't know if it was necessarily necessary. The same thing kind of went for the craft names. I didn't know if a craft name was really necessary. I didn't really know, I picked X, Y, and Z for my craft name. Do I really care? And then once I finally had somebody refer to me not as that craft name, I was like, oh, I actually really mesh with this. I really fuck with this.
It's a very easy trigger to use to get into that mindset. And
Yeah, I mean, if AuraLea were to be like, hey, insert craft name here, I'd be like, yes? What do you need? It's a very different trigger from like, hey, Ashley, I'd be like, hey, what? Like,
Right, and I'm trying to remember what was lost in that hour and a half, but I think I mentioned this. Oh, fuck, maybe, I don't know. But
Uncensored, it's fine.
Yeah, so maybe I mentioned this in the podcast that was shared. Maybe I didn't. But it goes back to, if someone, and if I said this, please tell me.
I don't remember, it's fine.
So it's like if I had a close friend who was like my full name, like yada, 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 yada. And I'm like, oh my God, what do you want from me? Because, as a child, not everyone may have gone through this, but I feel like a lot of us have. When your parents bust out your full name, it is serious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you have a completely different response to that. Whereas, I have a name. Most names have an affectionate term to an affectionate term for their full name, their first name, I should say, at least. So I have a nickname because my name's very common. So my friends know me as my nickname. But when someone, and it has to be a very old friend or a relative, if they bust out my first name in its full context, I'm like, oh shit, I identify with you in a different way than if you were a better friend and use this affectionate term for my full name, my first name. Fuck, I guess. So
that's so funny, actually, because this isn't out of your name or anything, but my name is Ashley, and I like when people refer to me as Ashley. When I was a kid and people would say Ash, for some reason that like put a stick up my ass, and I was like, don't fucking call me Ash, even though I loved Pokemon. And I remember the first time I watched Pokemon, I was like, Mom, there's the main character's name is Ash, but it's actually Ashley, because the first Pokemon episode I watched is like a day where he was like a cross-dresser. Don't ask me. And he went by Ashley in the episode. Anyway, my point is, I don't like when people call me Ash, but if it's somebody I'm very, very close to and they call me Ash, I'm like, oh, that's endearing. But if I just meet somebody and they're like, hey, Ash, I'm just like, go fuck yourself. And so for myself and AuraLea, we actually have the flipped version of that. So it's interesting that you say that.
Yeah. I mean, and that kind of comes back to the concept of names hold so much power, and also the right and the trust that you give to someone using a certain form of your name or a name that maybe other people don't know. In example, craft names. They hold a certain power, as it were, over you.
That's why I don't, it's not that I don't share my craft name on this podcast for lack of, wanting to be mysterious or anything like that. But it's what AuraLea is saying. I don't share my craft name on this podcast because I only like it being referred to in specific settings. And coming onto this podcast, Seeking Witchcraft, like I'm Ashley talking about witchcraft and Wicca. But my craft name is something different. It's a different aspect of myself. I'm coming about this with a very academic sense. And it's just a very interesting topic. Sassafras, do you have anything you want to add to this?
It's kind of funny how we've kind of come full circle and we're back to craft names.
Circles.
Oh my. Yes. As for myself, I'm using, the name Sassafras here. That's my craft name. The main reason for that is because my name is rare. My name is uncommon. And so I do this because I don't necessarily want to bring my standard life into this stuff. I want this stuff to be its own unique, isolated thing. For my own sake, because, I'm a private person. But, kind of going back to the power of names and the, spoken names, my actual name is very, very often mispronounced. It's pronounced as something else, or I'm just flat out called a very common name, which is not, tied in at all with my actual name, but they kind of sound a certain way, and so people just say, oh, they more or less says, oh, Christopher, and it's just like, oh, Christian. And it's just like, as if that's my name. Well, no, my name has been mispronounced like my entire life. To the point where...
Fucking same. My last name.
Oh, well, Well, anyway, we're not going to go there.
I'm in that club. It's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone is going to have ultimately their own take on
Cheers.
their craft name or their lack of craft name or how they view their own individual name being used and in different contexts. So that's what I have to say about that.
So, and okay, so, you know, me using strictly AuraLea for the purposes of this podcast, that says a lot about how I identify my craft name, meaning my craft name is not only just used for the specific circles that I find myself in my tradition and in my craft, but in things relating specifically to that area of my life. I retained that name because I would like to, I'm not saying that I have split personality or like anything of that nature, but I would like to, the energy that I have given to that name and how it identifies with that person that I am in circle and in that tradition, I want to tap into that as much as possible when I'm in a situation like a podcast that discusses nothing but this topic. It helps me hone in on this aspect of myself and not be distracted. If I were to use my mundane name, that bitch crazy. You know, like, she's not really going to have that.
Yeah, AuraLea.
Yeah, like, you know, she's not going to. I feel like I'm crazy saying this, but I put a lot of energy into different aspects of myself because I realize that I prioritize different areas of my life in different ways. So if you approach me and you're like, oh my God, AuraLea, I'm immediately going to shift into, you know, my witch self, and what I'm going to be focused on in your presence is that witch self. You could almost say that using that name with me consecrates me to the purpose of talking about things specifically relating to witchcraft. Like, if you speak to me using that name is consecrated to be committed to the topic of this area. Whereas my mundane name is not consecrated. It can go in any other direction in my life that is not this.
It also goes into a trigger. So, for example, this is not AuraLea's name, but I'm using it for the sake of this discussion. If her name, let's say, was Mary Sue. If I were to be like, hey, Mary Sue, how you feeling about the gods today? She'd probably be like, oh, they're fine. You know, they're with me, whatever. But if I were to be like, hey, AuraLea, how you feeling about those gods today? It's a whole nother topic.
I would immediately start, like, being in a space where I like download God stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's a different reaction. It evokes different responses in me.
Absolutely. And as I said, that's part of the reason I don't use my craft name. The biggest one is because I only like it being used in a circle context, but it's a different side of me, as you will. And it's crazy how much it influences your life, like how different Ashley is from insert craft name here. I mean, AuraLea and Sassafras are my HP and HPS. They might be able to agree with me or maybe disagree with me. AuraLea's shaking her head. Yes. I don't know. Yeah, it's just a different personality, and it's crazy to think of how much it influences.
This all goes back to the witchy mindset that we had been talking about previously. So yeah. I don't know.
Witch's pyramid?
Do we want to? Okay, if we're gonna. All right. We're gonna launch into the witch's pyramid,
which will be the final topic of the night,
and we're gonna wrap it up with that.
Uncensored. Why night?
Now.
What? Yeah.
Hey. Wow, if that
Clank.
broke, I would have fucking cried.
It would have been. It would have been.
Recorded, and it would have been amazing.
And I would have
in the podcast. Screaming. It would have been in the podcast.
Wonderful.
People would be like, "I'm so sorry about your couch. I'm so sorry." Anyway. So the witch's pyramid. What we now know, or rather,
what is the witch's pyramid?
Well, let me tell you where it came from first.
He knows the history. I know
all right,
the dynamics.
Sassafras.
So the witch's pyramid originated in, or rather, Eliphas Levi describes it in Transcendental Magic. It's
why is this important for beginners?
Practice and ritual. and it was known as the 4 powers of the Sphinx. Look it up. If you're brand new, look it up. Use your deductive powers to find it.
He's looking at me very aggressively right now.
We have seekers that have come to us that are incredibly knowledgeable and seek out this scholarly stuff, and that's Sassafras's forte, as it were. So I love that he brings out the dynamic of the history of it. So
yeah,
I'm just saying, like, if you want to know where a thing came from and you want to know more about it in that context, that's fine. However, it has kind of moved on. It hasn't stayed there. The Witch's Pyramid is so the particular wine that we've delved into in this moment. Everyone is drinking this particular wine. It seems to be. Ashley may not care for the flavor a whole lot.
I like it.
I know.
It's a very Valley Girl way.
It's the good stuff. I don't care.
Guys, I'm just reminding you, this is a very uncensored episode. We're just drinking wine and shooting the shit. Sassafras made some special wine that has herbs in it. Herbs that you can buy from the store.
That are legal.
And so it's a herbally infused wine. And
when witches drink wine, it gets weird.
Yes, when witches drink wine, it gets weird. It's a legal wine. It's nothing like that. But when you drink it, like, the herbs can get caught in your mouth. So we're just mostly me, making funny noises of because when you drink the wine, it gets stuck in your mouth. So you kind of have to chew it. So every time I do that, I just look at Sassafras like, how dare you put these herbs in my wine? Then now I have to eat them.
Gotta chew your wine.
That's essentially what I'm doing. I'm chewing my wine. Before we got to the Witch's Pyramid, I just want to say I hope you guys are enjoying this very uncensored.
It's like hanging out with us. This is what you can expect from hanging out with us. So
yes, and I do have a lot of people who hit up the podcast page saying that they feel like they're talking to a friend, which, oh my gosh, guys, it's so nice. Thank you so much. But I really hope that if you're listening to this fucking long-ass episode, that you do feel like you're hanging out with us. So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm going to give this back to Sassafras while I chew my wine.
You know, I've come to really appreciate the chewing aspect of this wine.
I'm enjoying the herbs. I'm just like,
it's a fucking sound effect.
There's just a sound effect when you chew the wine.
So
I'll be 2 seconds out.
So you know what are the four sides of the Witch's Pyramid?
You were asking the wrong witch.
I'm well.
AuraLea is the OG.
The first thing.
He has history.
Well, I'm not. Look, no. The only thing I'm giving him is go look it up if you want. That's it. That's all I'm giving him.
Smoke this cigarette in 30 seconds.
I have butts for kids. Don't smoke, kids.
Right. This is. So people are listening to the episode and they're going to be saying to themselves, "This is what it's like to hang out with them." They sound so tired. They sound exasperated. They sound. So the 4 sides are to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent.
Where does this come from? How can a beginner even?
If you think about magic total as a subject, not necessarily exclusively to witchcraft, but let's face it. If you're doing witchcraft, you're doing magic. We're going to go there. We're talking about that. Take these as sort of very root words. You don't add more words. More words doesn't help you here.
What is it again?
To know, to will,
to dare,
and to keep silent.
So why would you keep silent? Maybe we should just go through all 4 of those aspects.
Well, there's a saying which says that power.
Are you done smoking your cigarette?
I have a million butts out there.
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
AuraLea is back.
Ta-da!
Wow, we're getting real ratchet. I'm sorry, guys.
Look. Anyway.
So
to know,
what
to
we were
will, to dare to be silent.
Yep.
And to keep silent.
Yep.
And to chew your wine.
And the most difficult of that is
to keep
the keep silent part.
Yep.
Okay, you know what though? I will.
People like to run their mouths because they gotta be. I'm not gonna say that.
So I will say, actually, I think ironically, for myself, the easiest yet the hardest thing to do is to keep silent.
Yes.
Which
you get so excited about your spells.
Yes, you get so excited about your spells that you just want to talk to everybody about them, but then at the same time, you don't want to talk to anybody about it. It's very strange.
So, all right, y'all, I have opinions and thoughts about this thing. So, first of all, I am so excited to talk about this because the Witch's Pyramid. I don't know how to work a phone.
Sorry, guys. This is no surprise, but I record this off of my phone, and I have to check the time real quick. Again, this is uncensored. Okay.
I'm an Android
I
user,
just need to make sure that we're not going over the time limit again, because that was awful. We talked a very long time without actually recording. So again, special edition, uncensored. Love you guys. If you're still listening, you're the real OG. Here's AuraLea.
All right, so...
That rhymed.
Yeah. All right, so how do I even start this? I am so excited to talk about the Witch's Pyramid because it is one of those essential things to have in your toolbox of working magic. It is insane. So the Witch's Pyramid, sometimes also referred to as the Magician's Pyramid, which I believe is older than the term the Witch's Pyramid.
Oh, this is a whole ass topic.
Yes, it is a whole ass topic,
So
Ashley.
many
You are
layers. It's
correct.
Like fucking Shrek and Donkey with the onions.
So
That's witchcraft.
the Witch's Pyramid is a fundamental understanding that will absolutely supplement your magic. Because this podcast is geared towards, beginners and those who are starting out, I will stick to the context of this in how it affects your magic and how it affects spell work and things of that nature. So the Witch's Pyramid, I love it because if y'all had heard me in a previous podcast, you may have learned that I was an elemental witch before I became Gardnerian. And again, the obvious disclaimer, which always slinks its way into every episode, this is not reflective of the Gardnerian community or tradition.
Oh my
this
God,
is
true.
me. Yeah. Anything
in this episode.
Anything said here is not a Gardnerian standpoint. It just so happens I happen to be a Gardnerian high priestess talking about witchcraft. Anyway, so what the hell is the Witch's Pyramid? All right. It is 4 concepts, and they go in this specific order. It is to know, to will, to dare, and to be silent. What the hell does that mean? So these things align very closely and very significantly to the 4 elements. To know is air. Excuse me. To will is fire. To dare is water, which if you're from Maryland like myself, I would like to say water. So if you hear me say water, I am actually saying water.
Did you just out your state? Because I have not.
I have before.
I
Yeah.
have not out of my state.
Well, now you know.
High priestess from Maryland, but who knows about Ashley?
We could be recording this anywhere.
Anyway, so and then to be silent is earth. So what does that mean? All right, so let's look at this in an elemental perspective first. All right, so air is the element of thought and mental clarity and all things that represent the concept of brainstorming something. All things manifest first in your brain. All things manifest there because you've got to think something to know something or want something or manifest something or a combination.
More wine for this. I can.
You can.
Absolutely.
Fucking
Will other
literally.
people drink it?
Yeah.
It's late.
Oh God.
So AuraLea says yes. She's the HPS. I'm gonna go with her opinion. I love
So, and then you go to the south and you go to will. Willpower is the essence of the fire element. It is that thing in your gut that drives you. When you truly, truly want something, you can feel it burning in the center of yourself. Think back to the last time that you really, really wanted something and you burned and you went for it and you did everything in your power to get it. That is that fiery will.
Your desires burned you.
The next would be west, which is water, which is to dare. If you have ever gone to the ocean, and for those who are in a landlocked state and they have never seen the ocean, I am so sorry, but I'm hoping that maybe you have seen a lake or you have seen some body of water that has evoked this feeling inside of you. If you have ever gone to an ocean, and I will always use an ocean as an example because of where I live on the East Coast. If you've ever gone to the ocean and you sit there and you have the wind blowing over the ocean and over the waves in a completely different way than the way that the winds interact with the land around you and the trees or a meadow or a valley, and you had that very specific wind that travels over the water, and you sit there and you hear it and it evokes something very deep in you, and it pulls you to be incredibly emotional, and it pulls you outside of yourself to think about things or feel things that you wouldn't normally think or feel if you weren't in this environment. That is what is beckoning you to dare. It is beckoning you to pull yourself out of your head, and it is beckoning you to pull yourself out of your ego to do something that is incredibly scary. It makes you want to tread these waters and makes you want to go out and just surf these tides and experience these ebbs and flows because you want something so bad. You're willing to do whatever it takes. Then you have the fourth and final element and the fourth and final aspect of the witch's pyramid, which is to be silent. To be silent is an earth element. I'm not going to lie. It took me years to understand what this means, and I will use my example, and I hope that you guys can relate to this. So if you're in an area where you can walk in the woods, and if you're not, if you've ever walked in nature to get away from things, if you've ever gone for a walk in your local park or in your local wildlife refuge or your local state park, anywhere that is beyond the hustle and bustle of day-to-day life, especially if you're in a city, if you find yourself wanting to retreat to this natural, quiet area where it's just nature and you, I will never forget this one day that Sassafras and I went to a local trail, as it were, in our area. And I remember we ventured farther and farther and further into the woods. And the further that we went, the more I found myself using a hushed voice. Because something about the environment that we were in, where it was so secluded from humanity and it was so secluded from that hustle and bustle I previously described, it makes you almost want to whisper. And once we got to a certain part in the woods where you knew it was not often touched by humanity, you had this urge within yourself to be quiet. And I had never experienced that. And Sassafras is talking to me and I can't say anything. I just want to be quiet. I don't like silence. I hate silence. I need music or I need a fan blowing. I need some kind of noise. So for me to be in this environment where I had this overwhelming need for silence was the first time I truly understood what that was. And that was 2017. I've been practicing witchcraft since 2001. So yeah, exactly. And that's just brushing on the elemental associations of this pyramid.
And it's very interesting because when this idea was first introduced to me, I remember telling AuraLea, I said, why is Earth, for example, so silent? Because to me, Earth was one of the noisiest things out there because you go out into the wilderness and you can hear the crickets and you can hear the birds and you can hear the streams and you can hear the leaves blowing in the earth or in the wind. And it wasn't until she said, when you're in those moments, you are just quiet. You're just silent because you're listening to all this happen and it's something within yourself. And I was like, oh. And that was one of my oh shit moments.
I will say also, and this is probably jumping ahead a little bit, but I think it's relevant to say. So another one of our initiates, another one of our cover members, I had this phone conversation with her, and whenever we talk about things that are fantastical or things that sound crazy, when you do spiritual stuff for a long time, and when you do magic, and when you really venture into the meat of all of this, you go through some crazy shit.
Give yourself a little bit of credit.
You start to think you're fucking insane.
A little bit of lenience.
Right.
Be nice to yourself.
Yeah, and so one of our initiates called me one day, and she was talking to me about this spell she had done. Or it was either a spell she had performed, or it was an experience. It was something woo-woo-y, as it were, quote unquote, which is now trademarked. But I remember she had asked me, what the whole to be silent thing was, and I told her, I'm like, look, here's the thing, and I'm not selling covens, but just I told her, I'm like, look, here's the thing. When you talk about the incredibly personal, and I mean shit that touches your soul, crazy whack-ass spiritual experiences that you have, if you openly talk about it to people who are not on your level, or people who are not in the mental caliber to understand where you're coming from, you're going to pick up very quickly that they're not going to take you seriously, and that subtracts from that experience. It truly takes away from the lessons that the universe and or the gods and or your higher self is trying to tell you and deliver to you and give you. It's one of those reasons why to be silent is a whole thing. However, I will say that being in a coven, and I told her this as she was part of our coven, I'm like, look, that all being said, the purpose of having a coven, one of the many, is if there's anybody that you're going to express this kind of thing to, it's us, because we have given you a psycho-spiritual experience. We have exposed you to crazy things, and you've trusted us to do so. And if there's anyone you're going to talk to about this, it's us. So anyway, that's a whole aside. So going back into how the Witch's Pyramid affects your magic. All right. So let's start from scratch. So let's say that you got word that your friend's mom might have a debilitating mental issue. And you absolutely know that you want to do whatever you can as someone who has an interest in magic, who has a fundamental understanding of magic. You want to help them. You feel beyond yourself this overwhelming need to help them. Yes.
I just felt the need.
All right. So you know your friend tells you the news and you feel compelled. You know that you have the resources available to you. You have the ability. You want to do magic for them. You want to do something for them. You want to do a spell for them. Spells work in 4 steps. These 4 steps relate directly back to the Witch's Pyramid. The first step is to know. You know that you want to do magic. You know that you want to perform a spell. All of the academic or mental energy that goes into performing a spell, like writing down the steps or reading over the steps that you have previously laid down for yourself, doing the academic homework and the mundane homework that it takes to know what you're going to do in a spell/ritual to enact your desire. All right. Fun side note about to know. Once you know that you want to do a spell, the spell has already begun.
True.
I mean,
you can say that also about your journey onto the witchcraft world.
Yep.
You are so well onto your journey before you even realize that you actually are. Which sounds mystical as shit, but it's true.
So is witchcraft. Mystical as shit.
So the next step would be to will. All right. So you're moving into the aspect of fire. And as I explained before, fire is your willpower. Side note about fire. I can safely say, in my personal experience, being an elemental witch before I was a Gardenarian, and also working with the Witch's Pyramid in magic for all the areas I dip my feet in, this is the most important part of all of this. Your will is the fire you light in your ass to do magic, to do anything. This fiery aspect of the pyramid and also of the human existence is what makes things real. What does fire feed from? Air. You've got to have a plentiful enough amount of air, scientifically, for fire to ignite. All right? So you have got to have this mental picture. You have got to have done your homework. You have got to have done your, wine. But yeah, if you've done your homework, if you know what you want and you know the things that you want to work with, you can give that life by progressing to the next element and the next step of this pyramid by willing. All right, this is fire. Fire can only feed off of what you are willing it, i.e. what you're feeding it with oxygen in a scientific fashion. That willpower is enacted by you gathering your supplies, you setting up a date, you literally putting your plans to action. You are giving yourself, you've looked at the moon phase, you have utilized all the tools around you, regardless of your position, regardless of how new you are to this, it doesn't matter. If your will is set on it, that's the main tool that you need. That will also ties into my previous conversation about consecration. If your will is there, that thing that you're consecrating will be consecrated. So lighting a fire under your ass, make sure it's lit. So moving on to the next aspect of the Witch's Pyramid, and also the next aspect of the element, is to dare. To dare is the water element. All right. So you've gotten your resources and your information, and you have gotten all of your ducks in a row, as it were, and you're putting these plans into motion. So what does it mean to dare? So you have all of these things on your altar. You have figured out that Tuesday night's a full moon in Gemini, and that will help you with your purpose. And you are standing in front of your altar with your tools, and you are ready. And especially if you're a beginner, this might be very scary. This might be your first spell. Water enacts you to dare, because if you go to the ocean is terrifying. It is turbulent. It is incredibly reliant on the winds around it. And if the winds are incredible, you're going to have a choppy ocean. You're going to have a choppy sea. You're going to have resistance in the tides. There is something about the ocean that makes us want to run out to it, but it is always dangerous because of the tide. Daring and actually doing the magic with the resources and the mentality that you have collected is that element. That is the purest element of water. The last and final element, being one that I kind of skipped ahead before and talked about, was you've done your spell, now shut the fuck up.
True.
Do not talk about it. It is said that if you talk about a working that you do, it takes energy away from it. Why do they say that? If you talk about something before it has manifested, you are drawing upon a well that has not been filled yet. You cannot draw water from a well that has not gotten its potential yet. You cannot talk about a thing that hasn't happened yet. You have got to wait for it to manifest. And whereas you personally, as the person doing this, put the power into it, you are still feeding it power until it manifests. You can't draw from it before then. You've got to see it all the way through. Also, if you lay your seed down and you walk away from it, you are giving that same faith and power to whatever. This goes back into this is the very full circle conversation where it's like, hey, if you pray, you're giving up your will to a higher source. If you're a religious witch, i.e. a Wiccan, you are giving your power over to the gods, but not until you have given the work to them to manifest your will. If you've given them all of your manpower, Christ, if you've given them all of your willpower and all of your tools and resources and you've done the work, they will then take that and manifest it to your will and send it back to you in the form of what you want. And there's many other ways of identifying how your work gets recycled back to you. But again, you cannot draw on a well that has not been filled yet. Give it time to fill up.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you, AuraLea, for that really in-depth conversation and explanation into the witch's pyramid. Cool. Well, we have definitely talked for a long time, longer than what this episode is actually going to show, because there's probably at least at least an hour maybe where we were just talking, not realizing it wasn't recording, which sucks. Yeah. That really sucks. Well, we did give the Cliff Notes version. We pretty much talked about everything that was not covered. So any final parting words, Sassafras or AuraLea? Anyone? Bueller?
Blessed be.
Blessed eat.
It is not that hard to become a witch, but it does take work to stay a witch. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
That could be a whole topic.
It is very easy to do what we do. It is very easy to practice witchcraft, but if you want the fullest extent of what it can offer you, you've got to do the work.
And as you can see, there are a lot of layers of witchcraft. And the deeper that you get with this and the more you practice, the deeper it gets and the more significant those layers become. And not just the layers you're currently facing, but the ones you may have tossed out to the side that you didn't realize were anything important. And I know that sounds very odd, but it's very, very true. So yeah, so that is it. Thank you guys so much for listening to our uncensored, special edition, our wine night podcast.
Thanks for drinking wine with us.
Thank you to Sassafras and AuraLea who joined me for tonight's podcast. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. As always, you can follow me on my socials. Please let me know what you thought about this 2-hour-long episode. You can tweet me at Seek Witchcraft or hit me up on Facebook. I have a page that's called Seeking Witchcraft, or my Instagram, which is my Instagram. Wow. My Instagram, which is Seeking Witchcraft, or send me an email, guys, which is seekingwitchcraft@gmail.com. So thank you guys again so much for coming on. Thank you guys for those who listen, and I will talk to you guys all soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Goodbye.